congratulations on this. I'm so happy you got another chance to shape this how you always wanted. So I apologize if you've been asked these curiosity questions during this reintroduction to your film, but if you had gotten the opportunity to edit the way that you wanted to back at the time during its original release, do you think it would have looked like this, or did the last 25 plus years and what you've experienced shape this vision even further than what you wanted at the time?
Good question. I think it's a combination. I think like anybody can go back at any part of their life and be like, oh, what would I have done differently, right?
Hmm.
Friendship or relationship, any creative choice, anything, right? You can always like the accrued wisdom of 25 years is certainly makes you look at everything in a different prism, right?
Right.
And so this was a book I loved growing up, had the opportunity to make the movie, and the process of making the movie and editing the movie with Leo Trombetta.
Hmm.
We work on it and we get to the Sundance version. So every choice along the way makes sense. But when you shoot a 135-page script and your first assembly is 3.5 hours, even if you tighten that and put everything in, no one was going to let me at that time release a 2.5 hour version of the movie. Now, if of course, if I knew then what I knew now, or felt like that was the focus of what the film should be, what we have out now would have been the version then. But
Mm.
there was no fight between me and a studio about like, oh, this is what I want, or I think we showed something at Sundance that was like 15 minutes longer than what came out eventually in theaters.
Hmm.
And the big thing is this big beard sequence, and the whole beard sequence wasn't in the cut
Mm.
because it was like a 25-minute thing that you realized to get to time. If you lifted it out, the story made sense. Sonny's journey made sense. Sonny meeting Gail, he had met, Gunnar just disappeared for a little while, and they went to the dance, and it still happened. The main plot happened. The beard was a subplot, right? The beard
Hmm.
was really a subplot. But by taking out 25 minutes, you're kind of squinting now at a time. And I think the quarry was short. Maybe they went to the quarry and just dove in to refresh the water, but didn't really have long dialogue scenes where he explained what it was like to cut himself. So the depth of character was kind of like truncated. And it was more in the first act with a character, a preacher that his mom was trying to save him, and a preacher that she had come save him and stay at the house and throw away his porn magazines, and his Sonny's fantasy life, which culminates in his rejection by Gail, was really the fuel for that, right? But by taking it away, from the first train sequence when he looks at a magazine that he's kind of objectifying women and kind of afraid of them, right? Yet he still really wants to be with them. So by removing that whole chunk of the preacher and putting back the beard, you're making a choice to make it more like the novel. The
Hmm.
complete story of the book, as opposed to being truncated, now becomes more complete. But when we started doing this, there was no like intention of it being released. This was just an exercise. I
Sure.
found the old assembly of the tape, converted it to a drive, and gave it to Leo, the editor, who was between jobs, and he had an Avid at his house. And he was like, and he quickly came up with like a 2 hour and 15-minute version. And we watched it like, wow, that's really great. Wouldn't it be great if we could get that scene?
Hmm.
A few months later, we were doing some TV work with the studio, the rights of all the footage for Mothman and Arlington Road. And I said, guys, you have a Ben Affleck movie that was never seen. It never went to streaming. It never went to cable. You could make money because you could sell the movie. But
Hmm.
hey, how about I give you a new version of the movie, and that's even more appealing, right? Let me
Right.
give you let me give you a version of a new director's edit. not some like director's cut, like I'm Ridley Scott, just like a new version of the movie. But like all these guys became stars. Rachel Weisz, like there's Academy of Nick Offerman, all these
Yeah.
people. What if you got to see their first movie? So it's like, if you could do it for a price, again, money, right? Culture.
Hmm.
Suddenly we had an opportunity to actually make it. So thank God for Oscilloscope, which said had been releasing these 90s movies and redoing them on 4K. Wow, this actually could be real. We could actually, Leo and I were pinching ourselves like, this little fun exercise might end up seeing the light of day.
Yeah.
Right. And so then it became just a process and a project over a year long of finding the film and doing it and deciding. And thank God for Oscilloscope and Dan Berger. I said, you know what? I want to redo the score. And they're like, great, as long as it fits within the budget. So call in some favors, redo the titles, the music, the voiceover. And it's a quite different version of the film. And it's really closer to the book and closer to what I loved in the book. And I know for Leo, the editor, way, way, way happier now that this is out in the world than the other one.
Right. Was there anything particularly haunting about it after all these years thematically? Because it deals with some very, very real themes that still hold so much weight, if not more so today.
You know what? That's for people such as yourself and the Oscilloscope team and just the whole vibe of like watching it last night. Like, I was able to separate myself. When you watch a movie in a theater with an audience, you can separate yourself from being the filmmaker, right? So the fact that there's
Yeah.
this time detachment of 25 years, you're able to watch the movie and see how they respond, and you hear certain words of like Ben Affleck's talking about, we live in a horse culture. We're kind of like
Hmm.
always trying to jock over the other guy, and like it's all about kind of like who you are and identity. I'm like, God, he could be talking about social media, right? He
Yeah.
could be talking about our obsession with how you're being perceived and how that's kind of bullshit. So he had been exposed to a culture that was like, what is life about? These two guys are asking, what is life about? Who am I in this country that's kind of full of shit, right? Or
Hmm.
they perceived that there was hypocrisy, church piety, religious anti-Semitism, accusations of communism, like a lot of the same stuff that youth were dealing with then. Now, if you replace
Hmm.
certain words, it would be like somebody's 24, they've had this elongated adolescence because these guys graduated from college and then went to the war. So they're 24, 25 years old, and just kind of, they're like an 18-year-old. Who am I? What's going on? What am I going to do? And that's the core story. So those thematics of coming of age are kind of universal. Watch coming of age movies in the 1940s, 60s, 90s. It's a lot of grappling with the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
The Graduate, American Graffiti, different movies over time. Um, I don't know I don't know what coming of age movies in the last, look at like Eighth Grade as a coming of age movie, right? Great movie.
Hmm.
At its core, a central, awkward, vulnerable protagonist who was unsure of their place in a very kind of image-based world, right?
Yeah.
So the girl, the character's name in Eighth Grade, Bo Burnham's great film,
Hmm.
isn't that far removed from Jeremy Davies, right?
Yeah.
It's just going all the way was called The Catcher in the Rye of the Midwest. Holden
Hmm.
Caulfield, just again, who am I? Existential questions, philosophical uncertainty. No, I want to get somewhere, but I don't know how to get there.
Right. Yeah. I very much appreciate that very thoughtful answer, but I do want to talk about a very thoughtful scene, which is probably my favorite scene of the movie. And it's this discussion toward the end, this talk over a campfire. It's like It's one of my favorite scenes because I feel like it's two people really listening to each other versus putting up this facade, trying to impress each other. I'm curious if you recognize the strength of that scene versus other days and how that scene may impact you personally. Does it give you more patience like it may for me?
Absolutely, 1000%. My father had died maybe a year before I made the film.
Mm,
And that scene is one of three scenes. The one in the hallway where he sits with his mother talking about mortality and how hard it is to get old,
yeah.
and that fire scene were written specifically for the film by Dan Wakefield.
Hmm.
And I said, Dan, I want to counterpoint the title Going All the Way, which was kind of anachronistic in, maybe it was a cool phrase in the 50s, but in the 90s, it felt like a little cheesy, right?
Hmm.
So I said I wanted to connect Sonny's understanding of his act of release of pain to, I said, I just want to get that phrase in there. And I want Sonny to really honestly, in the intimacy of his friendship and truth, be able to really tell Gunnar the truth and tell himself the truth and hear him verbalize that. And Dan, who had written the book in the 70s, for him now, 25 years later, to be able to, I remember he said, to be able to write that scene was beautiful, to revisit the character, to be able to, so Dan's wisdom over 30 years had changed and was influenced in that monologue. And I remember I literally watched it last night and I was just like, how beautiful it was on the page, how simple we photographed it, how great Jeremy was,
Yeah.
um, and just like how just complete, as you said, Ben listening. I think Ben has two lines, the opening and the ending,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, I love it. So to be able to put that in as that triptych of the quarry, pushing Sonny into the water, the fire, the truth of the fire, and the aftermath of Ben saying, like, eat, live life, keep moving, right? You've got a lot going on. And
Hmm.
that's really kind of Gunnar's gift to Sonny in it, is this ability to help him see himself in a different way, which is
Yeah.
his struggle throughout the whole film.
Yeah. Yeah. I know we're about to run out of time, so I do want to conclude on probably one of the most impactful lines of the film, which is toward the very end. And it's about, I think it's just one of those lines that you could almost stitch on a pillow and it can live with you forever. And you can just think about it constantly. And it's how new beginnings never stop. And so I'm curious what your relationship is with new beginnings and how your dreams have evolved over the past 25 years.
You're talking about the final kind of passage, right? The final
Yeah.
voiceover, which is really the last paragraph of the book.
Yeah.
And I will encourage your watchers to buy the book. It's a
Yeah.
great book. It's an amazing. If you like the movie, you'll love the book. And start with the book, then watch the film. The circular nature of dreams and of life. I'm a big one for circles,
Hmm.
and that of deaths and rebirths and deaths and rebirths and reinventions and kind of like coming out of one thing and the evolution, right? And even though you might look at it and be like, here's the thing, there's the death of my father, the
Yeah.
death of my wife, the birth of my child, these signposts, which are in a way linear, right? But
Hmm.
for me, creatively, it is these overlapping circles, and maybe one circle would go from documentary to a movie to this to, I realized in the last few years of developing ideas and faith and material that I want to make movies for, and the circle of stumbling. I see the growth in my daughter. she's learning, she makes a mistake, she keeps like, but when she gets something, when it's like, oh my God. The other day she was like, Dad, I wish I could start my freshman year over again. If I knew now, I'm like, it's okay. Every day is an opportunity, just one day at a time to start over again.
Yeah.
Right. And not that you beat yourself up, but like, it's that same way creatively or in life is, kind of that wisdom, but we put so much pressure on ourselves to look ahead. And it's very, very, very difficult to not look ahead and just only look and be within where you are. So that spiritual questioning, inherently, that's what Dan Wakefield's life was about. He wrote spiritual books, books about miracles, nonfiction books. He's like literally a reverend too. I mean, Dan Wakefield, always raised as a Baptist. The book is very questioning, is this philosophical, spiritual questioning of identity and mortality. And it's wrapped around a tale of friendship and all these hijinks and all this stuff of growing up. But it's really like, how do you learn to learn? And how do you learn to live? And as it ends with, I remember when Dan Wakefield saw the movie, and he got to see it before he got glaucoma and can't see anymore. And he goes, you forgot the most important word. I said, what? He goes, begin. And we realized Leo had done the voiceover, but the last word of the book and which is really the beginning of Sonny's journey, was like, he goes, you can't do this without that word. And I was like, absolutely. So in tribute to him, a tribute to this guy who wrote it in the 70s, grew up in the 50s and 40s, now 2022, 72 years after the movie, his world existed, it's back out in the world.
It's really beautiful. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this very thoughtful and well-articulated conversation, just because I've always been drawn to films like this. I think one of my favorite films, and I know you're a fan just because you've worked with them, is Cameron Crowe's Vanilla Sky. His interpretation of Abra los Ojos. Like I just like films that kind of exist in this space where you feel lost and you're trying to find the ground underneath your feet. And I think there's just something so human and so, I don't know, like it kind of like knocks you over the head a little bit and makes you feel like you're truly a part of the world. And so that's what I get from a work like this.
Thanks. It's a great, great honor. And Cameron's a friend and was an early supporter. And I spoke to him recently before Almost Famous opened. And I said, oh, I'm doing this new version. And he goes, any version of Going All the Way I would love. He loved it. He was a huge, huge fan and gave me great advice. So he's one of my heroes.
Yeah. Can I quickly ask, who is your gunner in life? Like, who was your gunner then and who's your gunner now?
Well, in a way, I was Gunner and Sonny. That's what appealed to me in the book. I was a jock and a preppy jock, and but I was kind of insecure about certain things. And as I grew up, I was like, wow, I really want to be artistic, but can I be? And, so I wasn't sure. I don't think I was ever as kind of nervous about it and anxious as Sonny was, but and my brother had a lot of Gunner in him, so I looked up to him, and
yeah,
he was fearless. And Gunner's kind of fearless.
All you gotta do is get the GI Bill.
You should be on Ed Sullivan.
Oh, why not?
Jeremy Davies, Ben Affleck, Amy Locane, Rachel Weisz, Rose McGowan, with Jill Clayburgh and Leslie Ann Warren. Going All the Way, the director's edit.
I guess he just got too busy raising Cain down in Greenwich Village with the rest of the communists.